A lonely man gave away his winning ticket, but what happened a week later shocked everyone. The silence in Arthur Pendleton's house was a physical entity. It wasn't merely an absence of sound, it was a presence, thick and heavy, that clung to the furniture and settled in the corners like dust. It had been 3 years since the silence had first moved in, the day his wife Eleanor had left, not by choice, but by the swift, unforgiving hand of illness. Now the silence was his most constant companion. His routine was its rhythm, a metronome marking the slow, predictable passage of days. He would wake at 6, make coffee for 1, and read the local newspaper at the kitchen table, sitting in his usual chair while Eleanor's remained starkly empty. The only sounds were the rustle of paper, the soft clink of his spoon against the ceramic mug, and the hum of the old refrigerator. Arthur, a man of 68 with eyes the color of a faded sky, and hands softened by a lifetime of office work, had once been full of words. He and Eleanor had built their life on a foundation of shared stories, whispered jokes, and nightly discussions about everything and nothing. Now his words were rationed, spent only when necessary, a polite thank you to the grocery clerk, a nod to his neighbor. His world had shrunk to the 4 walls of his house and the well-trodden path of his daily walk. This walk was the only unpredictable part of his day. It was his quiet rebellion against the suffocating stillness of his home. He would trace a 2-mile loop through the gentle tree-lined streets of Oakhaven, a small, peaceful town that seemed to exist just outside the frantic rush of the modern world. His route always ended on Main Street, and his final stop, his sanctuary, was a small, unassuming shop with a forest green door and a gold leaf sign that read, "The Reading Nook." The Reading Nook was the town's heartbeat, a place that smelled of aging paper, brewed coffee, and quiet possibility. It was owned by a young couple, Leo and Elena, whose passion for literature was evident in every curated shelf and cozy armchair. Leo, with his perpetually untidy hair and ink-stained fingers, could find a book for any soul. Elena, whose smile was as warm as the tea she often served, had a gift for making every visitor feel like a long-lost friend. Arthur never said much to them, but he didn't have to. They understood. They would nod as he entered, and Elena would have his usual black coffee ready. He would take it, find a worn leather chair in the back corner, and lose himself in the pages of a history book, the only genre that felt distant enough from the raw emotion of his own life. For Arthur, the bookstore was more than a shop. It was a mausoleum of beautiful memories. Eleanor had loved places like this. She would have adored the way the light slanted through the front window in the late afternoon, illuminating dust motes dancing like tiny fairies. She would have loved Leo's impassioned defense of classic poetry and Elena's quiet, intuitive recommendations. Coming here was the closest he could get to sharing something with her again. It was a place where her memory felt alive, not as a painful ghost, but as a gentle, comforting presence. One crisp Tuesday afternoon, as Arthur sat in his usual corner, the fragile peace of the Reading Nook was pricked by a tension he could feel in the air. He saw Elena at the counter, her back to the store, her shoulders tense as she spoke in a hushed, urgent tone on the phone. Leo was nearby, pretending to organize a shelf of new arrivals, but his movements were stiff, and he kept glancing at his wife, his jaw tight with worry. Arthur couldn't hear the words, but he could read the language of despair. He saw Elena hang up the phone and lean heavily against the counter, her head bowed. Leo immediately went to her, wrapping his arms around her. Arthur saw her shoulders shake with a silent sob. He felt like an intruder on a profoundly private moment. He quietly closed his book, left a $5 bill on the small table beside his empty cup, and slipped out the door, the little bell above it chiming a farewell that felt for the first time mournful. He knew, with the gut certainty of someone who had faced his own share of loss, that they were in trouble. The Reading Nook, his last connection to a world of warmth and shared stories, was flickering like a candle in the wind. His walk home was heavy with a feeling of impending loss. He passed the small convenience store where Eleanor used to buy her gardening magazines and, on a whim, the lottery tickets she always called her $5 daydreams. She never won more than a few dollars, but she loved the ritual, the brief, sparkling moment of imagining a different life. On an impulse he didn't fully understand, Arthur went inside. The store was the same, filled with the scent of sugary slushies and cheap coffee. He walked to the counter and, feeling like he was channeling a ghost, bought a single Powerball ticket. He let the machine pick the numbers. It felt detached, random, meaningless. He tucked the small slip of paper into his worn leather wallet, next to the last faded photograph he had of Eleanor. and forgot about it. The week passed in its usual blur of silent breakfasts and lonely evenings. The weight of what he had witnessed at the bookstore settled upon him. He avoided his daily walk, afraid of what he might find. A for lease sign in the window, the forest green door locked for good. The thought was unbearable. Saturday night arrived, cold and clear. Arthur was watching a documentary about ancient civilizations, the narrator's voice a monotonous drone against the silence, when a commercial for the Powerball drawing flashed across the screen. The jackpot had swelled to an astronomical sum. He remembered the ticket then, a forgotten scrap in his wallet. With a sigh, he retrieved his laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating his tired face. He pulled the ticket from his wallet, Eleanor's smiling face looking up at him from the photo beside it. He typed the numbers from the lottery website into the search bar. One by one, he compared them to the numbers on his ticket. The first number matched. A small coincidence. The second matched. His breath hitched. The third. A strange fluttering sensation started in his chest. The fourth. The fifth. His hands began to shake. It wasn't possible. It was a mistake. He looked at the final number, the red Powerball. He looked at the screen, then at the ticket, then back at the screen. They were the same. The world seemed to fall away. The narrator's voice faded. The hum of the refrigerator ceased. All that existed was the profound, deafening silence of his house and the impossible string of numbers staring back at him. He had won. Hundreds of millions of dollars. An amount so vast it was abstract, a concept rather than a currency. He sat there for what felt like hours, the winning ticket lying on the table before him. He thought of all the things he could do. Buy a new house? This one was too full of ghosts, but also too full of memories. Travel the world? The idea of seeing the wonders of the world alone felt like the loneliest thing he could imagine. The money felt like an anchor, not a pair of wings. It was a solution to problems he didn't have, and a complication for a life he had simplified out of necessity. Then his mind drifted back to Tuesday afternoon, to the sight of Elena's shaking shoulders and the desperate look in Leo's eyes. He pictured the warm light of the reading nook, the smell of old books, the quiet corner that had become his own. He thought of Eleanor, of her $5 daydreams. She never dreamed of mansions or yachts. Her dreams were always smaller, more intimate. A garden greenhouse, a trip to see the Scottish Highlands, helping her sister pay off her mortgage. Her dreams were about creating comfort, security, and happiness for others. In that moment, a clarity washed over Arthur, as pure and sharp as the winter air outside. He knew what Eleanor would have done. He knew what he had to do. The money wasn't his. It was a message, a tool, a daydream sent from somewhere else, for someone else. It had a purpose, and that purpose had nothing to do with him. With a resolve he hadn't felt in years, he stood up. He carefully placed the ticket in the breast pocket of his coat, the one he wore on his walks. He didn't check the website again. He didn't need to. He walked out of his silent house, leaving the door unlocked behind him, and began the familiar walk to Main Street, his footsteps steady and sure under the vast star-filled sky. The reading nook was dark, but he could see a single dim light on in the back office. They were still there. He walked to the forest green door and knocked gently, the sound echoing in the quiet street, a small signal about to change everything. The sound of the knock, soft as it was, landed like a thunderclap inside the reading nook. Leo and Elena, who had been sitting in their small, cluttered office surrounded by stacks of unpaid invoices and threatening letters from the bank, both froze. They had been engaged in that quiet, desperate argument of two people who have run out of options, their words heavy with exhaustion and sorrow. The store had been their shared dream, a vessel for all their love and hope, and now it was sinking, pulling them down with it. A late-night visitor could only mean more bad news. A landlord with a final notice, perhaps. Leo, his face pale with dread, rose from his chair. "Stay here," he whispered to Elena, though the command was more for his own benefit than hers. He navigated the shadowy aisles of books, their silent spines standing like tombstones for his failed ambition. He reached the forest green door and peered through the small glass pane. He saw only the stooped silhouette of Arthur Pendleton, the quiet, elderly man who came in for coffee and never spoke a word. Confusion warred with his anxiety. What could Mr. Pendleton possibly want at this hour? He unlocked the door, opening it just a crack. "Mr. Pendleton, is everything all right?" Arthur didn't answer immediately. He simply looked at Leo, his faded blue eyes holding an unusual intensity. Then, without a word, He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the small creased lottery ticket. He held it out. Leo stared at the slip of paper, then back at Arthur's unreadable face. "I think you dropped this," Arthur said, his voice raspy from disuse. It was such a strange, nonsensical thing to say. Leo knew he hadn't bought a lottery ticket in years. "I'm sorry, Mr. Pendleton, but that's not mine. You must be mistaken." "No," Arthur said, his gaze unwavering. "I'm not mistaken. It's for the store, for you and your wife." He gently pushed the ticket into Leo's unresisting hand. "Check the numbers. From tonight." Elena, hearing the strange conversation, had come to stand behind Leo, her hand resting on his arm. The air was thick with bewilderment. Leo looked down at the ticket, then at Arthur, a flicker of concern crossing his features. He wondered if the old man was unwell, confused. "Sir, this is very kind, but we can't," Leo began, trying to hand it back. "Please," Arthur interrupted, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. "Just check them. For me. For Eleanor." The name hung in the air between them. They knew he was a widower, but he had never once spoken his wife's name. The raw vulnerability in that single word stopped Leo from protesting further. He nodded slowly, a sense of unreality descending upon him. He closed the door, leaving Arthur standing on the quiet sidewalk, and walked back to the office with Elena, the ticket feeling strangely heavy in his hand. "What was that all about?" Elena whispered, her eyes wide. "I have no idea," Leo confessed. He sat down at his desk and pulled up the lottery website on his laptop, his heart thumping with a rhythm of confused apprehension. It felt like a dream, a strange and illogical one. He read the winning numbers aloud, his voice flat. Elena pulled another chair close, her gaze fixed on the ticket in his hand as he compared them. The first number matched. Elena let out a small, nervous laugh. "Well, that's something." The second. The laugh died in her throat. The third. Leo's hand, holding the ticket, began to tremble. Elena's own hand flew to her mouth. By the fourth number, they were both silent, leaning so close to the screen that their heads were nearly touching. The fifth. A choked sound escaped Elena's lips. Leo's voice was a bare whisper as he read the final number, the red Powerball. He looked from the screen to the ticket, his eyes tracing the impossible line of digits again and again. "It can't be," he breathed, the words stolen from his lungs. "It's a mistake. It has to be a mistake." Elena grabbed the ticket from his shaking fingers, her own eyes scanning the numbers, her expression a mask of pure disbelief. Then she looked at Leo, and the dam of her composure broke. Tears streamed down her face, not tears of sorrow, but of something so overwhelming she couldn't name it. Joy, shock, deliverance. It was all there, a tidal wave of emotion that left her breathless. Leo stared at her, then at the screen, and finally the reality of it crashed down upon him. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders heaving with the force of a sob that was years in the making. All the sleepless nights, the fear, the shame of failing, it all washed away in an instant. They clung to each other amidst the piles of debt notices, laughing and crying at the same time. After a few minutes, a single thought pierced through their euphoria. Arthur. They scrambled to the door and flung it open. The street was empty. Arthur was gone, vanished into the night as quietly as he had appeared. They stood there, the cold night air on their tear-stained faces, holding a slip of paper that had rewritten their future, gifted to them by a lonely man who barely knew their names. The next morning they found him. He was in his usual corner at the reading nook, a history book open in his lap, a cup of coffee on the table beside him. He looked up as they approached, his expression calm as if nothing had happened. Leo and Elena sat down opposite him, their movements hesitant. They didn't know what to say. "Thank you," felt like a pebble thrown into the Grand Canyon. "Mr. Pendleton, Arthur," Leo began, his voice thick with emotion. We don't understand." "Why?" Elena asked, her voice soft. "Why would you do this for us?" Arthur closed his book, placing his hand gently on the cover. For the first time he truly looked at them, and they saw not just a quiet old man but a person carrying a profound and lasting grief. "This place," he began, his voice quiet but clear. "My wife, Eleanor, she would have loved this place. She loved the smell of books. She said every bookstore was a house with 1,000 souls living in it." A sad, gentle smile touched his lips. "When she passed, the world went quiet. My house, it's too quiet. Coming here, it was the only place I could still feel her just a little." I could imagine her in the next aisle finding a new treasure. He looked around the cozy, sunlit store. I heard you on the phone the other day. I saw your faces. I knew what was happening. I couldn't bear the thought of this place going silent too. He looked down at his hands. That money, it's just paper. It can't buy back a single conversation. It can't fill an empty chair. But it can do this. It can keep this house of souls alive. Eleanor would have liked that. She always preferred happy endings. The simple, profound honesty of his words left them speechless. They weren't just recipients of a financial windfall. They were custodians of a memory, guardians of a love story. They were no longer just saving their business. They were honoring a legacy. 1 week later, the headline in the Oakhaven Gazette was the talk of the town. Local bookstore saved by mystery benefactor. The story was vague, mentioning only an act of unprecedented generosity that had not only cleared the store's debts, but provided a foundation for its future. The town was buzzing with speculation. That Saturday, a week after that fateful night, a crowd gathered outside the reading nook. A large banner covered a new sign above the door. Leo and Elena stood on a small, temporary podium, looking out at the faces of their friends, family, and customers. "We are here today because of a miracle," Leo said, his voice ringing with a newfound confidence. This store was about to close its doors forever, but someone, a person who understands that a town's true wealth is in its community, gave us a second chance. Elena stepped forward. This gift was never about us. It was about creating something that will last. It was about honoring a love for stories and the quiet magic of a place like this. She gestured towards the banner. And so, it's our profound honor to ensure that the spirit behind this gift is never forgotten. With that, the banner was lowered. The crowd gasped, then broke into heartfelt applause. The beautiful gold leaf sign still read, "The Reading Nook," but beneath it, a new, elegant plaque had been installed. It read, "Featuring the Eleanor Pendleton Community Reading Room." The real shock for the town, however, wasn't the sign. It was the man standing beside Leo and Elena. It was Arthur Pendleton, but it was not the Arthur they knew. The slump in his shoulders was gone. He was wearing a warm blue sweater, and his face, for so long a mask of quiet sorrow, was alight with a gentle, genuine smile. He wasn't hiding in a corner. He was in the center of it all. As the doors opened, he didn't retreat to his chair. Instead, he walked over to the new children's section, a bright, vibrant space he had helped design. He picked up a picture book, sat down in a small chair, and a group of children immediately gathered at his feet. The people of Oakhaven watched, stunned and deeply moved, as the lonely man they had only ever known as a ghost in their midst began to read a story aloud. His voice, once raspy from silence, now filled with warmth and expression. He had given away a fortune, but in doing so he had purchased something far more valuable. He had found his voice again. He had found a family. He had filled the deafening silence of his life with the most beautiful sound in the world, the rustle of turning pages and the laughter of children. The lonely man was home. True wealth is not in the fortune one accumulates, but in the impact one has on the lives of others. Arthur's story teaches us that luck can indeed change a life, but it is generosity that transforms it. By letting go of the money, he lost nothing. On the contrary, he gained a new family and a place to belong, proving that the most selfless acts are, in the end, those that bring us the greatest reward. Luck gave him a winning ticket, but the choice to share it gave him back his life. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a little hope. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of kindness and unexpected blessings.